The courtroom was packed. People whispered among themselves, their voices hushed but curious. It was a high-profile case, one that had drawn media attention and legal experts from all over. But no one was talking about the case itself. Their attention was on the young attorney standing at the plaintiff's table. Sophia Carter. At just 26, she was one of the youngest lawyers to take on a case of this magnitude. Many doubted her. Some even laughed at the idea of her going up against Judge Harold Whitman, a man known for his sharp tongue, impatience, and clear disdain for young lawyers. He had been on the bench for over 30 years, and in that time he had built a reputation as one of the toughest judges in the state. He didn't tolerate what he called inexperienced theatrics in his courtroom. And now, Sophia stood before him, ready to argue her case. She straightened her blazer, her hands steady despite the weight of the moment. She had worked tirelessly to get here. She wasn't about to let anyone intimidate her, not the opposing counsel, not the press, and certainly not Judge Whitman. He leaned forward, peering down at her with a smirk. "Miss Carter, you do realize this is a real courtroom, don't you? Not a mock trial at your law school?" Laughter echoed in the room. The opposing counsel smirked, shaking his head as if Sophia had already lost. But she didn't flinch. Instead, she met the judge's gaze, her voice calm and unwavering. "Yes, Your Honor, I'm well aware, and I can assure you I'm prepared to present my case." Judge Whitman raised an eyebrow, clearly amused. "We'll see about that," he said, flipping through the case files. Sophia took a deep breath. She knew he was underestimating her. Everyone in the room was. But they had no idea what was coming. Judge Whitman sighed dramatically as he adjusted his glasses. "Very well, Miss Carter. Let's see if you can keep up. Proceed with your opening statement." Sophia walked to the center of the courtroom, her posture firm and confident. She scanned the jury, making sure to establish a connection before she spoke. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," she began, her voice steady. "We are here today because of a betrayal of trust. A hardworking man, Mr. Daniel Lawson, dedicated years of his life to a company that, in return, discarded him like he was nothing. Not only did they terminate his employment without cause, but they also withheld his rightful compensation. He stands before you today, not just seeking justice for himself, but to ensure that no other employee suffers the same injustice." Judge Whitman cleared his throat loudly, cutting her off. "Miss Carter, you might want to keep your dramatics for a theater stage. Let's focus on the facts." A few chuckles rippled through the courtroom, but Sophia remained composed. She expected this. The judge's reputation preceded him. She turned to the jury again. "The facts, Your Honor, are clear. Mr. Lawson was promised certain benefits in his contract, benefits that were illegally denied to him after his dismissal. We have evidence that the company's top executives knowingly ignored their obligations." She paused, letting her words sink in before continuing. "We are not here to debate feelings or opinions. We are here to look at the truth. And the truth," she said, glancing toward the defense, "is written in black and white." Judge Whitman leaned back in his chair, eyeing her closely. It was clear he hadn't expected her to hold her ground so easily. The defense attorney, Mr. Calloway, stood up, buttoning his expensive suit. He was a seasoned lawyer, known for dismantling young attorneys with ease. He smiled at Sophia as if she were a child playing a grown-up's game. "Well, that was an enthusiastic introduction," he said, smirking. "But enthusiasm doesn't win cases, evidence does, and frankly, Miss Carter, you don't have enough." Sophia met his gaze without hesitation. "I guess we'll let the jury decide that, won't we?" Judge Whitman sighed again, clearly impatient. "Let's move this along. Mr. Calloway, your turn." As the defense began their argument, Sophia sat down, her hands clasped together on the table. She knew this was only the beginning. What they didn't know was that she had something up her sleeve. Something that would turn this case upside down. Mr. Calloway strolled confidently to the jury, flashing a practiced smile. He had done this 100 times before. Discredit the opposition, make them seem inexperienced, and win the case with ease. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice smooth and controlled. "Miss Carter speaks of betrayal, injustice, and wrongdoing. But what she fails to mention is that the company acted within its legal rights." He turned slightly, gesturing toward Daniel Lawson, who sat quietly beside Sophia. "Mr. Lawson was an at-will employee," Calloway continued. That means his employer had every right to terminate him. There was no breach of contract, no unlawful action, just a decision that unfortunately did not work in Mr. Lawson's favor. Sophia listened carefully, not reacting. She had expected this argument. Calloway walked back to his table and picked up a thick stack of papers. What's more, Your Honor, we have documentation proving that Mr. Lawson was compensated fairly according to company policy. There was no wrongdoing, no deception. Just a man who, for some reason, believes he's entitled to more than what the law allows. He turned towards Sophia, his smirk growing. Miss Carter may be passionate, but passion does not equal proof. Judge Whitman nodded. That's a strong argument for it, Miss Carter. Do you have a response? Sophia stood, adjusting her blazer. She could feel the eyes of the courtroom on her. This was the moment she had been waiting for. She stepped forward, pulling out a single sheet of paper and holding it up. Your Honor, I'd like to submit this into evidence. Calloway frowned. What is that? Sophia walked to the judge's bench and handed him the document. It's a copy of Mr. Lawson's employment contract. A full contract, not the limited version the defense is referring to. Judge Whitman adjusted his glasses and skimmed through the document. His expression shifted slightly, but he said nothing yet. Sophia turned to the jury. Mr. Calloway is correct that most employees are at will, but in this case he is wrong. She took a step closer to the jury box. Mr. Lawson was not an at-will employee. His contract explicitly guaranteed job security and severance under specific conditions. Conditions that were violated when he was fired. Murmurs spread across the courtroom. Calloway's face darkened. That document is fully signed and legally binding, Sophia cut in smoothly, and I'd like to call a witness who can verify its authenticity. Judge Whitman leaned forward, suddenly more interested. Who is this witness? Sophia turned toward the courtroom doors, her confidence unwavering. The person who drafted this contract, the company's former HR director. Gasps filled the room. Calloway's smirk was gone. He looked panicked. And for the first time, Judge Whitman seemed truly intrigued. The door to the courtroom swung open, and a tall woman in her 40s entered. She was dressed professionally, but there was a nervous energy about her that Sophia couldn't help but notice. The woman, Kelly Dawson, hesitated for a moment, her eyes scanning the room before she walked toward the witness stand. She gave Sophia a brief, uncertain glance before taking the oath. Sophia took a deep breath, trying to steady her own nerves as she walked toward her. This was the turning point. If Kelly Dawson confirmed the details of the contract, everything would change. Ms. Dawson, Sophia began, her voice calm yet firm, thank you for agreeing to testify today. Could you please tell the court your role with the company in question? Kelly nodded, her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted her glasses. I was the Human Resources Director for 5 years. I was responsible for drafting and maintaining the contracts for all employees, including Mr. Lawson. Sophia smiled gently, trying to put her at ease. And in your professional capacity, did you personally draft Mr. Lawson's employment contract? Yes, I did. Kelly's voice was quieter now, almost hesitant. Can you confirm that Mr. Lawson's contract contained provisions for job security and severance in the event of termination? Kelly glanced toward the defense table before nodding. Yes, it did. The contract outlined conditions for termination, and if the company decided to end his employment, they were required to offer severance pay and provide adequate notice. Sophia leaned forward slightly. And were those provisions followed when Mr. Lawson was terminated? Kelly hesitated. No, they were not. The company violated the terms of the contract. The room was silent. No one had expected this answer. Sophia turned to face the jury, her expression triumphant but composed. Ladies and gentlemen, what you are hearing is undeniable proof that Mr. Lawson was wronged. The company did not follow its own rules. Not only did they fire him without cause, but they failed to provide the severance that was owed to him. Judge Whitman looked at Kelly, his tone surprisingly softer. Ms. Dawson, is this your final statement? Kelly hesitated, glancing at the defense. It is, Your Honor. I was pressured by the company to overlook the provisions. I'm just doing what's right now. There was an audible gasp from the courtroom. Kelly Dawson had just admitted to complicity in the cover-up. Sophia's heart raced, but she kept her composure. This was the moment she'd been waiting for, the moment when the truth was finally revealed. "Thank you, Miss Dawson," Sophia said quietly, her eyes meeting the jury's once again. "No further questions, Your Honor." Judge Whitman looked toward the defense, his usual sternness replaced with something almost like a quiet admiration. Calloway stood slowly, his face flushed with frustration. "Miss Dawson, are you claiming that the company intentionally breached its contract with Mr. Lawson?" "I'm saying that the company made a decision that went against the terms of the contract," Kelly replied, her voice growing stronger. "And I was told to ignore it." Sophia knew she had the upper hand now. She watched as the defense tried to scramble for a response, but it was clear the tide had turned. She'd done it. But even as victory seemed within her grasp, she couldn't shake the feeling that the battle wasn't quite over. The courtroom was thick with tension. The defense was clearly rattled, their carefully constructed arguments falling apart with every word that came from Kelly Dawson's mouth. But Sophia knew better than to think the case was won just yet. She had scored a major point, but there was still the matter of how Judge Whitman would rule, and the quiet, calculating look on the judge's face made her wary. After a long pause, Judge Whitman spoke. "Mr. Calloway, do you have any further questions for the witness?" Calloway stood, his face flushed with anger. He cleared his throat, trying to regain his composure. "No, Your Honor. No further questions." Sophia didn't take her eyes off the judge. She could feel the weight of his gaze on her, as if he was measuring her every move. She knew he was still skeptical. "Miss Carter," Judge Whitman began, his voice calm but deliberate, "you've made a strong case here today. However, I must remind you that the burden of proof is still on the plaintiff. The evidence you've provided so far is compelling, but it is not conclusive." Sophia nodded respectfully. "I understand, Your Honor. But I believe the evidence speaks for itself. The company violated its own contract, and now we have a witness willing to testify to that fact." Judge Whitman's eyes narrowed as he glanced at Kelly Dawson, who was still sitting at the witness stand. "We shall see. This case is far from over, Miss Carter. I will allow the jury to deliberate, but I expect them to consider all the facts before making a decision." The jury filed out of the room and the courtroom grew quiet once more. Sophia could feel her heart pounding in her chest. This was it, the final stretch. But as she looked at her client, Daniel Lawson, she noticed something that made her stomach churn. He was trembling, not with excitement or relief, but with fear. Sophia walked over to him and placed a hand on his shoulder. "It's going to be okay," she said, trying to reassure him. He looked up at her, his eyes filled with uncertainty. "What if they don't believe us? What if the jury thinks it's all just a misunderstanding?" Sophia shook her head. "We've done everything right. You've done everything right. Don't worry. We'll get through this." But even as she said the words, a nagging doubt crept into her mind. Was she truly ready for whatever came next? The minutes dragged by, each second stretching into what felt like an eternity. Finally, the jury returned. The foreperson stood and cleared her throat, the tension in the air palpable. Judge Whitman looked at her, his face unreadable. "Have you reached a verdict?" The foreperson nodded. "We have, Your Honor." She paused before continuing. "We find in favor of the plaintiff, Mr. Daniel Lawson, on the grounds of breach of contract and failure to provide severance pay." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Sophia's heart skipped a beat. She had won. But as the judge's gavel came down, signaling the end of the trial, something unexpected happened. Judge Whitman, who had remained stoic throughout the proceedings, leaned forward and looked directly at Sophia. "Well done, Miss Carter," he said quietly, the words a rare acknowledgement from a man known for his harsh demeanor. "You've earned this victory." Sophia blinked in surprise, but a small smile tugged at the corner of her lips. She hadn't expected praise, especially not from a man like him. But there was something in his voice, something almost begrudgingly respectful. She had proven herself today, and for the first time Sophia truly felt like a real attorney. As the courtroom erupted in applause, Sophia felt a wave of relief wash over her. It was the validation she had worked so hard for. Daniel Lawson, her client, stood up, his eyes wide with disbelief as the jury's decision sank in. He had won. The defense team, on the other hand, looked defeated. Calloway stood with his arms crossed, his jaw clenched tightly as he exchanged a few words with his colleagues. They had lost, and there was no denying it. Sophia turned to Daniel, her eyes softening as she watched him. You did it, Daniel. You got the justice you deserved. Tears welled up in his eyes as he shook his head. I don't know what to say. I never thought I'd get this far. You really came through for me. Sophia smiled, her own emotions threatening to spill over. It was your fight, Daniel. I just helped you tell your story. You stood up for what was right, and that's what matters. The courtroom was slowly emptying out, and the buzz of conversation began to fill the air as the verdict settled in. But amidst the chaos, Sophia's mind drifted to the unexpected moment she had shared with Judge Whitman. She hadn't expected him to acknowledge her victory, especially not with such sincerity. There had been no mockery, no condescension, just quiet respect. It was something Sophia had always wanted to earn, but never imagined she'd get from a judge like him. As she gathered her things, a familiar voice called out to her. Miss Carter? She turned to find Judge Whitman standing behind her, a rare flicker of approval in his eyes. Your closing argument, well, your entire performance today was impressive. You've proven you belong here. He paused, as if weighing his words carefully. Just don't get too comfortable. This is just one victory. Keep working hard. There are bigger challenges ahead. Sophia nodded, feeling both humbled and motivated by his words. Thank you, Your Honor. I will. With that, Judge Whitman turned and walked away, his usual stern expression back in place. As she watched him leave, Sophia's heart swelled with a mixture of gratitude and determination. She had faced the toughest challenge of her career, and not only had she overcome it, she had earned the respect of someone who had spent decades in the courtroom. It wasn't just about winning a case. It was about proving to herself and to others that she was capable of anything. And as she walked out of the courtroom with Daniel, she knew one thing for certain. This was just the beginning. Hey there, thank you so much for watching. We hope you enjoyed the story as much as we loved bringing it to you. If you're interested in more heart-pounding tales with unexpected twists and emotional moments, be sure to subscribe to our channel so you never miss a story. If you liked this video, don't forget to hit that like button and share it with your friends. Let's spread these incredible stories far and wide. We'd also love to hear your thoughts, so leave us a comment below. What did you think of the story? Do you have any ideas for future videos? We read every comment, and your feedback means the world to us. Thanks again for being part of our journey. See you in the next video.